His neck, specifically the atlas, is a pivot joint and is in protraction. The ball and socket joint made up of the clavicle, scapula, and humerus in the shoulder are in depression, while his elbows, which are hinge joints made up of the humerus and radius, his wrists that are plane joints, and his fingers, which are condylar joints, are all in extension. His hips are ball and socket joints made up of the femur and acetabulum. Both are in extension. His knees are hinge joints made up of the femur, fibula, and patella. His left knee is in extension while his right knee is in flexation. Both ankles are in plantar flexion and are plane joints made up of the talus, tibia, and fibula. Finally, his toes, which are condylar joints, are in extension.
Okay, this is model number 2. He is in the process of rotating his arms and bending his knees. Just barely, he has moved his right leg forward right next to his left. This is an attempt to get momentum so the dive will go faster. We're going to go ahead and break this down. We see at his neck, which is a pivot joint at the atlas, that his head is in protraction. We also see that his shoulders are in depression. More specifically about his shoulder, which is a ball and socket joint, his arms are in circumduction because of this. Beneath that we see his elbow, which is a hinge joint, and it is in slight flexion. Beneath that we see his wrist, which is plane joints, which is in extension. His fingers are made of condylar joints, and they are also in flexion. Down by his hips, which is a ball and socket joint, we see that it is in flexion. His knee, which is a hinge joint similar to the elbow, is also in flexion. His ankle, which are plane joints, are in plantar.
In stage 3, the model's atlas, which is a pivot joint, is in retraction. His ball and socket joint, which is made up of the clavicle, scapula, and humerus, are going through circumduction. The elbows, which are hinge joints, are in extension, while his wrist, which is a plane joint, is in pronation, and his phalanges, which are condylar joints, are in extension. His hips are ball and socket joints, which are made up of the femur and acetabulum, and are in flexion. His knees, which are hinge joints, are in flexion as well. Both ankles are plantar and are plane joints, which are made up of the talus, tibia, and fibula. And at last, his toes are condylar joints, which are in an extension.
In the fourth part of the dive, the phalanges, which are condylar, and carpals, which are planar, are in extension. At the elbows, made of the humerus, radius, and ulna, is a hinge joint, which is in extension. At the ball and socket joint, made up of the humerus and scapula, is going through circumduction. The neck, which is a pivot joint, is in retraction. At the hip, the ball and socket joint is in flexion, and the patella is in extension. Finally, the tarsals, which are planar, and the phalanges, which are condylar, are both in extension.